Michael Gross, welcome to the show. Mad Max Radio, Live 365, iHeartRadio. We have one of the all-time greats here, and he's from Chicago originally. Goes by Michael
Now
Gross. We
let's
know him at
let's not
Family
over
Ties.
let's not overstate this. All time greats is a little too much even for me. I
Oh,
look I look very washed out and pale, which of course I am. I'm so white. There, that's a little better.
but I have to finish giving you the intro here. Family Ties, Tremors. Man, you've been in some iconic pieces, man. You definitely are, man. I know you're very humble, but when we look back, you got some iconic roles under your belt. But welcome to the show, Michael Gross. How's everything going?
Thank you very much. I've been very fortunate to have some great writers and some great series.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky.
And now you got this new Christmas Netflix movie with Heather Graham. So how's that?
Well, actually, pretty good. This is actually I've got a couple of things. Heather Graham is kind of a romantic comedy. It's called Chosen Family, and it's available on streaming and in limited release this Friday, the 11th, day after tomorrow. And then there's a Netflix Christmas film, which will be available on Netflix on the 20th of November, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Congratulations.
so lucky me again. You
So, I mean, before we really dive into everything with your acting work, but how do you feel about how the industry has changed? Because now we have Netflix, and when you were coming up, you were going through theater, then you had NBC with Family Ties and going through real studios. We still have that, but how do you feel? Just your view is on the whole industry now that you have streaming services.
that's it's a good question. I'm I think there's a real balance to my answer. And on one hand, there are far more venues, but on the other hand, that big old pie has been cut into smaller pieces, and people want to pay less, particularly with unproven things, with new streaming services and things like that. And it's not always about quality. There's a lot of quantity out there, but to my mind, there's not the quality that there could be. So I'm I'm sort of pro and con. There's I'm always looking for good scripts. The best scripts on whatever streaming service or anything are always hard to find. So I always think if you grade on a curve, there's a lot of C stuff out there. Fewer B plus works, and A, and the great mass of things that are available out there is basically good, decent, average stuff, but there's a lot more average stuff than there used to be. There's obviously some great stuff out there, but that great stuff, that cream off the top, is always rare.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you've been in some rare pieces, and we're going to talk about that today. But you're a Chicago kid. You came up in Chicago, and you came up in the theater. High school was where it really all started. But I believe your first performance was like off stage. I heard for a Christmas Carol. That was your very first performance when you were a kid, third grade.
You're very good. Yeah, you've done your research. I think I was about in third grade, and I was an offstage Christmas caroler singing on the street, at whom Ebenezer Scrooge threw a shoe out his window or told me to shut the hell up, this kind of thing. And so that was in grammar school. And I don't think I did another play again until high school. And I
Wow.
didn't have any, and I didn't have any shoes thrown at me, fortunately.
Well, that's a good thing. In the folk music, you were singing in the choirs and stuff like that. I heard your mother was very talented and that she was even into like comedy and acting and stuff, and was really the one that wanted you to be outgoing.
Well, she was. My mother was quite a clown, actually. She was Carol Burnett, slapstick and craziness, and she was the one at the parties, definitely with the lampshade on her head. And as a kid, I found it very embarrassing, but some of it sunk in. She was fearless, absolutely fearless, in terms of getting up in front of complete strangers and going a little wacko. So I think that was an inspiration in some ways. As a kid, I was like, "Oh my God, why can't I have a normal mother?" But but something sunk in, and so she was really inspiring. I would sit in the corner with my father and say, "We don't know that woman." You just want your mother to be like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
But something rubbed off, something I couldn't put my finger on at the time, and which I frankly found a little embarrassing at the time. But by golly, she taught me a lot. Just that fearlessness of getting up in front of a crowd and saying, "What the hell? Let's just do it."
Yeah. And let's take it because when we look at it with the Saturday nights, because we're in the month of October, so you used to watch all these classic Universal monsters. Who was the one that you would say really inspired you from the actor's perspective? Because Bela Lugosi terrorized audiences. I think Lon Chaney Jr. is a really great actor. Who was that one that really stuck in your mind that inspired you in any way, shape, or form in your acting career?
Oh boy, to pick one would be difficult because I loved all those old Carl Laemmle Universal pictures. That is to say, The Mummy with Boris Karloff
Oh yeah.
and Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolf Man, The Invisible Man. All those sorts of great, those great classics. That I had a little thing when I was a kid. There was uh, a great show on in Chicago on Saturday nights called Shock Theater, and 10 o'clock on Saturday nights, and it was the in grammar school was the latest night I could stay up because I could always watch Shock Theater, and I had a little ritual where I would take my Three Musketeers bar and put it in the freezer that afternoon, and take it out at 10 o'clock at night and watch Shock Theater with these great old horror films, and eat my frozen Three Musketeers bar. And that was like as cool as it got for me as about a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old.
I think one that really stuck with you was going to see them. Them was a big impact.
Boy, yeah, absolutely. I went to see that was still one of my favorites. As a matter of fact, that's one of the few that I went out and got a DVD of that. That was a Warner Brothers picture about, I want to say about 1956 or 57. And I was taken to that by my uncle. It was my dear cousin's birthday. And so my uncle took uh, my cousin and all the cousins, and I think we sat in the front row and watched those incredible giant ants. And I thought that was a very, very well done. It's still one of my favorites. I think it's a fine horror film.
Yeah.
And I will say I'm not. A lot of people will ask me this. I'm not a big fan of horror per se. Tremors stood out to me because I thought the characters were also wonderful. It had comedy. It had it had a quirkiness to it that was just amazing. And I was not necessarily looking for a horror film. I was looking for good characters and a great story, and Tremors provided that.
Yeah.
So
And we're
a lot of people think, "Oh, you love horror films." I said, "There's a lot I haven't seen, and probably most of them. I'm not interested necessarily in the chainsaws, a lot of bloodletting, kids going in a house at night and somebody's chasing them down, a house full of teenagers being stalked one by one. Not interested, not in the slightest,
yeah.
particularly in the gory stuff.
Oh, I get it. And a lot of it today is they overdo it with the gore. And I think with Tremors, it's a classic cult film. And we could get right into Tremors, then go back to Family Ties because Tremors was such an interesting role and learning about it that it didn't do well at the box office. So this was going to be my question for you about the film was how were they able to go on and produce all these sequels despite it not being a box office success?
You're quite right. It was a bit of a flop. It was out in the theatrical release for approximately a week. I don't think attendance was that good. I don't know who to blame for that. There's some people who say, well, Universal Studios promoted it as a straight horror film, which it was not. It was a horror film like oh, I don't know. It was just so offbeat. It was strange. This was a horror film that took place almost entirely in daylight, not at night. It was not in confined spaces like haunted houses or caves. It was in broad daylight in the middle of the desert. And it was part Western, a part adventure film, part horror. It was went through all these genres, part comedy. I always say, it was like to horror films what Naked Gun was to with Leslie Nielsen to detective things. It wasn't, that's not a detective story. It was far more than that. And so Tremors, in a sense, was far more than that. Some people say, well, it wasn't promoted correctly. I don't know. All I know is where it really caught fire was in the aftermarket videos, the days of VHS. People, it started going around, became this little cultish thing. And Universal turned around one day and said, my God, we've sold thousands of these things. There's clearly some interest out there. Maybe we should make a second one. So it was really fan driven from the very beginning. It had to do with how many things were being sold in the aftermarket videos.
Wow. And then Fred Ward was able to come back with you and do the second one, and rest in peace to him. And you were acting with him in other things before Tremors too. You two were familiar with each other.
Uh, I had actually worked with him in something called Big Business with
Mm.
Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin. And I want to say that was about 1986 or something like that. And I first met Fred, and we had another occasion where we met, and he was the consummate actor. He's still one of my, I mean, Fred and Kevin were great together, but still to this day, when I watch it, I watch for Fred's wonderful, subtle looks at Kevin Bacon at some point, particularly when a woman is involved. Fred was just, man, he was an actor's actor, and I loved him to death. And I'm so sorry we've lost him. As uh, he and Kevin together paired in one more film with along with Reba and a few others would have been absolutely perfect. And I'm sorry he's gone.
Yeah, no, it would have. And just hearing about it, because I wanted to get into some of the scenes, but there was a story that I heard that Kevin Bacon was planning on doing something with Tremors on his own and that you weren't involved. Is that true?
Uh, Kevin, in fact, did something on his own. I mean, big corporations are a little hard to corral. There was We were making these Tremors sequels as part of as through a group that was associated with Universal Studios, Universal Home Entertainment. We did seven of these things. Partway through this, six sequels, I should say. Partway through this, another portion of Universal Entertainment sold to Kevin the rights to make a Tremors on his own, a freestanding Tremors that had nothing to do with what the rest of us had been doing for years. Okay. I don't know how it happened, but parts of those companies, it was as if we never existed with the six sequels we did. Kevin obviously wanted to do his own thing, uh, recast it. Uh, I never saw it, but I know that I was not asked to be a part of it, and it was something done with, I think, the Sci-Fi Network. Long story short, did an entire pilot. It was not picked up. Uh, Sci-Fi said no, thank you, and that was the end of it.
Mm.
So I've never seen it. I don't know what happened. Um, all I know, it was strange of Universal. A lot of us thought, particularly as we had been doing this for all these years, that they were selling Tremors out from under us to an individual who wanted to do something on his own, as if, I mean, it's the problem with a big corporate group.
Yeah.
One part of the corporation was saying, "Oh yeah, let's make a little money and license it to Kevin to do what he was going to do," while this other thing was running on parallel tracks. It's like, what the hell were they thinking? I don't know. I thought that a lot about Universal over the years because, quite frankly, I think they missed the boat with heavily promoting it in the first place, merchandising it. When you think of all the Burt Gummer action figures and all that other stuff, which people have come up with on their own, I don't know why they didn't do it. Um, I got paid whether they did it or not, but I think they really missed something in really getting. This was very fan driven. I think fans are still avid about it, as I find in these autograph shows and horror shows. And I don't know. They just I think they regarded it as kind of a bastard child. It wasn't important enough for them to really go full throttle with it. Too bad,
Oh,
but that's what it was.
yeah. How was it reuniting with Kevin Bacon? Because I remember when you did the Super Bowl commercial years ago.
Well, it was great. We had a great time. That was after he had done this. I don't mean to speak for Kevin,
Yeah.
but we spoke to each other about what if we could put together one last Tremors with the original group, um, with or without Universal. If the original group could get the rights to it, and he was all for it. He loved that first his affection for Tremors had grown over the years, clearly, because he said on several occasions, I would do that again in a heartbeat. I would play that character. And part of what he wanted to do with his original series was revisit the character 40 years after the fact and see what had become of everybody in the town of Perfection, Nevada. Um, that didn't happen. So in a sense, I think he felt disappointed or burned by that experience. And he said to me, look, I don't want to produce anything. I would love to do it if a package were presented to me and it was all taken care of, but I don't want to be responsible for making this thing happen again. And so I totally got that. We've talked about it with some of the original people, and to be honest with you, some of the rights to the Tremors franchise are in a kind of legal limbo now. I don't know where it stands, but I know that there are other people out there aside from Universal who would be interested in doing another one. And it would be fascinating because I think it would be a bunch of geriatrics trying to put this thing together. The original people, old Burt, old Val, old Reba, all these people who have aged over 30 years since the original, trying to have this one last stand in a town that I very much see dying, like the town in the Last Picture Show, the old Perfection, Nevada.
And it's such a classic
So
character.
I could actually see it as a cross between Cocoon, with all these old people, one last stand in this Last Picture Show town, saying, "By God, let's pull this together. Let's put on our artificial rims and put in our teeth and go fight these guys."
And Burt Gummer is such a classic character. I love the basement shootout in the first one. It just never gets old between you and Reba. How was that scene? Because actually, that would be the scene where the worm grabs onto your leg.
Right. Well, all I can tell you is that it was a scary thing for me because the day we shot that scene, it was a day that scene and no other scene was going to be shot. It took hours to put together that fake wall, that monster on a track coming through the wall, that monster head. They ran simultaneously several cameras because they had to get it from every angle. And my fear was, if I don't get this right and they have to shoot it again, I'm going to be so embarrassed because it's going to take a day to reset this entire wall and to reset Bert's rec room again. And I'm going to be responsible for the screw up. So I actually felt, do not get a line wrong, do not drop something, do not anything to prevent them from yelling cut. Because once that baby started, we were on a roll. And once that thing came through the wall, we couldn't stop. And it would have taken forever to reset that wall again of all their weapons. And, it would have been insane. So to be honest with you, rather than thinking about the acting, I was just thinking, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. Don't make the entire crew have to go through this again. You're going to look like an idiot. Do not screw up. That's the sort of thing I was thinking about during most of that scene. Just not to avoid. I think that's what most of acting is. You prepare basically to avoid public embarrassment.
Yeah. And you've always been well prepared. And just me doing my research on you, you're someone who's really on top of your acting craft. And it's interesting if they did bring back another Tremors and just learning the history behind it, is that you really wanted to show the emotional side of Burt, especially when he finds out about his son that he didn't know about. His son was there in the later films. Do you think that it would still be possible for us to get, because it's more action driven towards the later films? Do you think that if there were to be a new film that you would maybe be able to have some say to the point of, let's add some emotion in here finally?
Well, let's say that I wanted challenges for Bert,
Mhm.
uh, personal challenges as well as just challenges from the standpoint of the monsters, because that gets old. Bert
Yeah.
is good at what he does. He's caught off guard at certain times, but he basically he MacGyvers everything together and finds a way to defeat these things, right? And that's good in and of itself. But he's such a closed off individual, right? Solitary, um, paranoid, OCD, and I wanted things to challenge him on an emotional level too. For example, in Tremors 5, finding out he had a son he didn't even know existed. For a solitary man, what does it mean for somebody to say, "Hey, I'm your kid. Look at me. We're we're related." It's like he doesn't want to say, I want to have anything to do with that. My first impulse, if you watch that film correctly, when Jamie Kennedy reveals who he is, I'm in this huge truck. I jump off the truck and start walking away. Like, I don't even want to hear this. Um, Emotionally, Bert is a very shut down guy, and so I thought it would be interesting to look at the personal challenges he has rather than just the challenges of the monsters. So we could do both, and I just think those personal stories are far more interesting, or as interesting as they are the horror, the sci-fi. In the next one, we talked about Bert coming very close. He had been infected with some graboid venom and was very close. What happened if he has to hand the reins over to somebody else to do his job for him because he's too sick to do it? Is he close to death, and what does that mean for him? Naturally, we did that in a comic way. We had him at one point with an eye running around in a hospital uniform with his ass hanging out and an IV stand, next to him. There are ways to make it funny, but also to have that challenge of what's it like to bring Bert close to mortality.
Mhm.
And then in the final one, it wasn't as fully realized as I would have liked it to have been. Um, what was it like to have a woman in his life? He had never had any of those. Again, he's a solitary dude. He feels safest when he's alone and totally in control. And the worst thing I think about intimacy is it comes close to having somebody else in control. If you're really going to let them in your life, it's taking a huge chance of letting someone else in your life and not, of losing control. And I think Bert, as a control freak, I thought that was an interesting thing to explore. Naturally, if we did it again, I'd want to find both tracks. What challenges him emotionally as psychologically, as well as what challenges him on the ground fighting monsters. I just think it's a more interesting story. What's at stake personally, as well as just in the story itself with the monsters.
I agree. I think that would be really interesting. We need that to happen. I love the Cubs hat change because I know you're from Chicago, because we all know you with the
Exactly.
Atlanta Hawks hat on from the first one and eventually switched to the Cubs hat.
The yeah, I mean, it really meant something after all those years for the Cubs to win that pennant. And I just went to and I said, look, yeah, we had the Atlanta Hawks thing for all those years. Basically, that started out simply because in the first film, I had said to the wardrobe people, I think Bert needs a cap. It's practical. He's out in the sun all the time. You want to keep shaded from the sun. He's a desert dweller. I didn't necessarily want cowboy. And I said, I don't care what you find. I said, I think I want a Southern sports team, and I don't care what it is. I want a Southern sports and he wears that cap. And all we know is the Atlanta Hawks sent us a bunch of crap. We put it on our heads, and off we went. Off we went, and we went and we did that for a number of films until the Cubs won the pennant for the first time in over 100 years. And I went, hey, I got to go with the Cubs. I'm sorry.
Classic. It's a classic franchise, and I do hope that we get to see Burt Gummer to where you said that the physical aspect, the things he goes through personally. I do hope we see that in the future, and I think it will. I think because it's fan driven. I heard about the Tremors Festival with George Martin really putting things together. So strong fan base.
George has been amazing about this. The first I met George personally over completely different subject matter. And the first thing he wanted to talk about, one of the first things he wanted to talk about with me was Tremors. And then he said, oh, let me see if I can get the original film and let's have a private screening. He's a part owner in a theater. A friend of his owns a theater in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he said, let's just have a private screening for you and me and about 30 friends. So we did that once. And then the next thing you know, he said, wow, we ought to get all these films and have a festival. So he just kept rolling with this thing. And later this month, October, I want to say 25, 26, 27, something like that, we will be in Santa Fe, New Mexico, doing a Tremors Film Fest, which will have a great emphasis this time on the series, actually. We'll show several. We'll be showing Tremors 1 and Tremors 2 on the big screen, but dragging out some of the scripts from the series and having some readings of some of these scripts from the series, among other things. So it'll always be fun.
I remember getting my first copy of Tremors when I was a little kid it was a VHS tape. Remember that? All the young
Right.
kids listening out there at Blockbuster. And I remember I bought it there it's crazy. Just my memory of watching that as a kid and just seeing all the sequels go on and then talking to you. It's crazy.
I know it's been great because it's been passed on from father and son and grandfather to father and grandson right now, where they've got several generations of kids watching this. I'm just so thrilled they getting such a kick out of it, and and they're all ages too. And so I'll hear from people who are maybe a little more conservative who say, I can't quite say ass blasters with my kids, so we say butt blasters, things like this. They find their way to do it. And I say, well, I hope the language isn't too raw for some of them, but I'll tell you why I think it's a good family film. And because number one, I love the values in it. That is to say, unlike today when everything gets so politicized,
Everything.
we have so many different sorts of people in the town of Perfection. Some of them are, let's say, very right wing, very loosey goosey, maybe left wing, and so forth. When push comes to shove, we all come together to fight the common dread, the common monster, right? We put all our differences aside and act together as a group, as family. And one of the things I love about Burt is too, and I think I love Burt. I've come to really love him and stick up for him. I'm an advocate for Burt. I think he's a very noble character. You say, Burt, give me a break. I said, no, what I mean about it is this. He will say to somebody, you're an idiot, you're a fool, and you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. But by God, if that person gets into trouble, Burt is the first one to come to his rescue and say, I'm finished with the blame. He was an idiot, but I'm going to save his sorry ass. That's who Burt is. And I think there's a kind of nobility in that. He may say, I'm not going to help him because he's a fool. No, he's always going to come to the rescue. He believes in science. He believes in that bottom line. He knows his stuff backwards and forwards. And so he's enlightened in a certain very scientific way. He'll use every bit of knowledge that he could get, scientific knowledge, to get to the bottom of things. And he'll fight to the death for somebody he doesn't even like, because that's the kind of guy he is. So I think there's a kind of nobility in Burt. I think he's great. And the other reason I think it's a very family-friendly franchise is that in none of these films, and this is something I've insisted upon, Burt never turns his gun on another human being. Somebody may get the drop on Burt, but he never gets the drop on somebody else. He always points his gun at the monsters, and that's it. We don't fight each other as human beings. I mean, they'll do this, they'll do that, they'll get the drop on Burt, but we made a point for Burt never to point his guns at the bad guys. It's always at the monsters. The monsters are the worst of the worst. And so I think it's family friendly in that way. Burt knows his guns. He's also, some people say, hey, wait, come on. Burt wants guns for everybody. I says, no, you don't listen to what he says to Melvin in Tremors 1. And this is gun control. I wouldn't give you a gun if it was World War III. There's certain people who shouldn't have them, who are idiots, who can't handle them, who are psychologically and intellectually incapable of doing the right thing with a weapon. So certain people should not get them. So that's Burt practicing gun control. Background checks. Melvin, you're never getting a gun. So he's a very responsible gun owner.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He knows his stuff, and he's only willing to share that knowledge with people who he thinks is going to handle it capably.
Yeah. And you had a lot of theater experience being in the University of Illinois there with Chicago, and you actually come out to Yale. I'm from Connecticut originally, so you had your time in Yale, then going out to Broadway and doing off-Broadway work. Before we really get into family ties, why was there a time where you preferred off-Broadway instead of Broadway? Because I did hear that you chose something off-Broadway when you had a Broadway offer.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Well, yeah, I was in a Broadway show, and well, at the same time I auditioned for this Broadway show, I auditioned for an off-Broadway show. The off-Broadway show was being directed by a man named Joseph Chaikin, who's passed away now. He was a great theater director and used to run a group called the Open Theater in New York, which was a very sort of avant-garde theater who was doing a lot of very things before anybody else, experimental theaters, and just fascinating stuff. He was getting his teeth into some experimental and interesting theater, and I knew he was kind of a guru. And so I auditioned for Joseph Chaikin to do an off-Broadway show and auditioned for this Broadway show. Both offers came in the same week. They said, my agent said, you got an offer for a Broadway show. You got an offer for an off-Broadway show. You know, a lot less money without the Broadway expo, all that sort of thing, a limited run. And I said, oh, I want to do the off-Broadway show. He said, are you nuts? And I said, no, I want to work with this director. I want to work with this director because he's a hero to theater actors and to the acting and directing world. He's a guru. And he said, you got to be kidding. So my agent went back to the Broadway show and said, he's actually turning you down. And the Broadway show, what, he wants more money? He said, no, it's not about the money. They said, well, we'll offer more money. I still said, no. And they finally went, he's serious about this, isn't he? He wants to do this other thing. So I got the most amazing Broadway contract. They said, okay, he can open the show, rehearse with us, open the show, play in the show for a month, and we're going to allow him to leave to go and do this other show. So it was the most amazing, because usually it's the run of the play contract, but I got to open the show, got some nice reviews. And the moment I opened that show, I started rehearsing during the day for the other show. And finally, after about 3 or 4 weeks, left the Broadway show and opened the other show, which, was only like a month or 6-week run. And the Broadway show ran for months and months and months, but I never went back to it. I sort of thought, been there, done that. Somebody had stepped in to play the role for me, and he did a lovely job. And I thought, why would I want to go back? I mean, I did it already. And, but that was, some would say I was a little crazy. I wasn't necessarily looking for the limelight. I was looking for a great education and a wonderful opportunity to be with a man whose work I had revered for years, I'd heard about, and I thought, this is my chance to work with this guy. And I had a great time doing it and did not regret one minute of that.
No, and you really got your start and really just going hard with the theater, and then that's when you get the contact to get out to California for Family Ties, but you auditioned in New York, and it was really your wife was the one who was really putting the contract together and the
Right.
negotiating, I heard, to
Yeah.
get you out there?
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. The woman to whom I've now been married for 40 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We had our 40th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Uh, she was working in the casting department and management at Paramount Studios, where Family Ties was being produced. She was the person with whom, when we made the deal for Family Ties, she was the person with whom my agent fought on the phone for the deal. And she was saying, "Oh, yeah, okay, he's won a couple of off-Broadway awards and this and that and the other thing, but he's a nobody out here. Come on, come on. We get." She kept, driving him down, and this guy would come to me and say, my agent would say, "I can't get her to raise the price anymore. She's basically saying, you're a nobody out here. You have very little television experience. You've never had a series before, all this sort of thing." Her name was Elsa, a very Germanic name, right? Her first name is Elsa. And I just thought that was a very German name. And I started referring to her as the bitch of Buchenwald with my agent. That became our nickname for her because she wasn't coming, it's like, hell, I'm going to be living in my car and I'm going to have a TV series because she won't come up with the money. Finally, we had to settle for what she was paying us. We came out to do the series, and as the series got more popular, I renegotiated and sort of got the money up and all that sort of thing as the series became a hit. But we laugh about it now because I said, had you known what you know now, that is that we were going to fall in love and marry within 2 years of my coming out to do Family Ties, you would have done a lot better for me. Hoist on your own petard. You would have given me a lot more money because who would know that someday some of that would be yours?
It's just a lovely story to hear just how that
Well,
connection came to
yeah,
be.
we were
And you
we were
created
we
your own
were
Family Ties.
we exactly. We were working on one contract, and little do we know that there was another contract in the offing, one that was going to last a lot longer than the series.
Yeah, 7 seasons. Oh, when did you guys, because you mentioned, because the pilot was a big hit for you. I know that was the most that you ever made at that time. When did you guys as a cast realize that you had a hit on your hands?
It took a while. I mean, we knew there had been a great response to the Michael J. Fox character, Alex, early on because there was this sort of teen idol little thing going on there. He uh, Young prepubescent girls were loving this character. He was cute and was not um, uh, in a sort of non-sexual, sweet sort of way. And so there was beginning to be a following. This was before the Back to the Future phenomenon happened. So it was beginning to be a following. But in that first year, we were not doing particularly well. We were coming in maybe in the 30th percent, 30 ranking 30th, maybe 20 on a lucky day, but it was not a crazy all out hit. NBC kept moving us around. They weren't quite sure what they were going to do with us. Fortunately, it was those days where, by God, there were some people at NBC who were patient enough uh, with our uh, with our producer Gary David Goldberg, and with his instincts to say, "We're going to give you a chance, even though you're not coming out of the opening gate here with a huge hit. We're going to let it run, see what happens." And so, frankly, I don't think it was until we got renewed after the first 13. Oh, we got renewed for the second 13, making 26 episodes that first season. But it never felt like a sure thing for a while. We didn't really hit our stride in a big stride in a huge way. We were like top 20 material. We were okay, But until in those final years, they put us behind that crazy, wonderful Thursday night where it was uh, Crosby and Cosby and Family Ties and Night Court and Cheers, and it was a tremendous night. It was at those must-see TV nights on Thursday that it was regularly Family Ties number one, Cosby number one, Family Ties number two. People say, "You're America's most famous father." I said, "No, I'm America's most famous Caucasian father."
Well, now you
Cosby.
probably are because of the controversy.
Well, yeah, right. But Cosby was number one,
Yeah.
and we were number two, and we got fortunate. Audiences found us. Well, those were the days when NBC and a wonderful guy called Brandon Tartikoff, who was head of NBC in those days, who said, "You're not a great hit, but I there's something I trust in this thing it's gonna come around." And that's hard to find these days. It's hard to find. It's like, "Oh no, we're canceling you after 3 episodes. You're not a hit." It's like, whoa, come on. There was a trust and there was a respect for the um, the writer producer and a trust for the material, saying this may not be a hit coming right out of the gate, but I think there's something there worth mining and worth staying for it, worth trusting. Lucky us.
Yeah. And when you look at the show, a great success, like we said, 7 seasons. But one the episodes that really sticks out in my mind is when you're in the hospital because everyone knows that scene.
Right, right. I mean, they did some very brave things. Stephen having a heart attack. That was a two-part series, and having to come home and living with the fear of having another, and yet keeping it light, keeping it comic. You know, there's one great scene where he wakes up out of his he wakes up out of his anesthetic, and uh, and I think Meredith Baxter is looking at him. He comes out of the anesthetic, and and
Heaven.
uh, and Meredith is there, and he says, "Oh my God, am I in heaven?" And the character of Nick pushes him aside and say, "Hey, hey, Mr. Keaton," and he said something like, "No, no, think I'm in the other place," or something like this. So, we managed to keep it light, and um, as well as he again fate. Like I want to do with you're keeping it light and keeping it funny, but again you're dealing with very personal, extreme issues. Dealing with his own mortality. Uh, the writers of Family Ties were pure genius, as far as I'm
I
concerned. Being
agree.
able to being able to tackle very very serious subjects, Alex's first sexual experience and stuff like that. Um, uh, uh, but keeping it light, keeping it comic. Um, uh, the loss of good friends, loss through death, things like this. Alcoholism. 2 episodes with uh, Meredith's brother, played by um, his name, Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
in an early episode, dealing with the alcoholism of her brother, yet keeping it funny, keeping it crazy, and dealing with serious issues. Though, I mean, they were so good at balancing the serious with the comic.
Absolutely.
Very talented people.
And I agree. And you guys really are a family on and off the screen. I've seen a lot of the times you guys have gotten together for shows and things like that. When did you find out that Courtney Cox was going to become a part of the cast in the later seasons?
Um, it wasn't until she was cast and
She just
and and
cast, yeah.
and showed up, and I loved working with her. She was a real doll, and it was great to see her go on with other thing and her success and Friends. And I always thought she was an absolute dear and wonderful to work with. Just a lovely human being. Um, but that was we. It was the show was always well cast, and we were just extremely fortunate. Everybody we had who came on guest casts were considered guests in our house. We tried to treat them as well as we could and realized they were very much a part of the formula and a part of the chemistry that was going to make us work.
Yeah.
If we didn't work well with them, the show wasn't going to work. So we always tried to welcome them with open arms. And I think we had a reputation for being a very friendly cast. It's like, hey, welcome to the group. We're glad you're here. You're here to help us, and we'll help you as much as we can. This is, you're a guest in our house. Um, it was magic sometimes. It really was, because everybody got along so well. I think I took it for granted. I did not know at that time that all casts did not get along that well. I was a theater baby. I hadn't even watched a lot of primetime television, and I didn't know the stories behind a lot of these shows. That sometimes it was cutthroat.
Yeah.
People hated each other when they weren't on screen together, weren't on camera together. Um, that was not the case with us, and so I didn't know in some ways how lucky we were.
Yeah. No, and you remain close with the cast. I know that you're still close with Michael J. Fox, and you'll even meet up with him. I've heard when you still go to New York. I heard.
I haven't seen him in a couple of years,
Wow.
among other things, because I haven't been in New York in a couple of years. I
Yeah.
haven't been here since before COVID, frankly.
Wow.
And to work, and I used to work there regularly. And when I got and I stopped, just visiting friends because of COVID. Everybody was sort of like lying low, and but I'm well overdue. And when I get back, I try to have breakfast or lunch or something like that with him, and with one of our former writers and other people who are in the show. Meredith and I are still quite close. As a matter of fact, I just spoke to her today. Um, for the past 3 years, we have done a theater benefit for a friend of mine who runs a theater in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Again, the same place where we're having this Tremors Festival in a couple of weeks. And I have a dear friend who was a teacher of mine at the School of Drama at Yale University back in 1970. How old does that make me, my friend? Um, he was a teacher of mine, and he is in his 80s now and running a theater in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And particularly after COVID, they had, were running on fumes in terms of money. And I said, let me see if I can talk my friend Meredith Baxter into doing a benefit together with me. See if we can do a two-hander. See if we can do a play and come out here and see if we can, raise some money for you guys. Do a benefit. So we started doing that 3 years ago, and every year for the last 3 years we have uh, done a play together, she and I, at this theater. So it's always a great opportunity for us to get together just as friends, and I talked to her about it today, and I said, well, we may not do another one of those. I said, we've done three, and that pretty much, three's a charm. Maybe that's a good place to start. And she said, yeah, it would also be nice to get paid, wouldn't it? Because she actually, she and I both did that gratis. The arrangement was, of course, I have a home in Santa Fe. I've had a second home in Santa Fe for many years. And so I'd say, look, if you could fly Meredith out here, get her out here, I'll put her up. So just you won't have hotel expenses and stuff like this. We'll come out here and she'll stay with me, and we'll do this on the lowdown. And you guys won't have to spend a lot of money, and hopefully you'll just make a lot for the benefit. But we'll keep the overhead really, really low. So we've done that for 3 years straight, and I think we've probably done it for the last time. As she joked with me today, yeah, wouldn't it be nice to get paid? But we still get together. We're still colleagues in that way, and it's always a pleasure working with her again. We very much love each other.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a beautiful thing, and just the chemistry that in the bond that has remained over the years. And I did want to talk about this TV movie in the line of duty, the FBI murders, because this was something that was shocking for you when you got approached to do this. Because you were like, how did you get approached to do this? Because it's so out of the box, and you're a killer in it. So when you got the
Wow.
role for this movie, were you worried about how you were going to be viewed now? Because I know in
Yeah.
certain roles, when you look at Scorpio from Dirty Harry, I know the actor Andrew Robinson who played him in that, he was getting threatened. People actually villainized this guy. So were you worried about how people were going to portray you in taking this role?
I have never I have never cared what people thought one
Mhm.
way or the other. I always thought what I owed an audience was doing the best possible job of whatever in whatever character I was playing. If he was a if he was Steven Keaton, wonderful. It was Burt Gummer, paranoid, obsessive compulsive disordered, uh, hilarious. It's the best. I'll do the best Burt Gummer I can. And if it was this heartless son of a bitch in uh, in this thing called In the Line of Duty, the FBI Murders, co-starring with David Soul, who was just wonderful, a cold-hearted bastard. And David was a God rest his soul. He's just
Yeah.
gone this last year. So um, David was a wonderful, uh, wonderful to share that work with him. A wonderful partner in that piece, and we just had the best time being sons of bitches, and would laugh about it every day. As these two crazy bastards, based on a true story,
Yeah.
uh, and I I welcome the chance to do any. I welcome the chance to do anything that's very different from what I was doing.
Mhm.
For years on Family Ties, that In the Line of Duty was done in 1987. So I had already been doing Family Ties for 5 years, and was one of America's favorite fathers, one of the nicest guys on the television tube. And so when somebody was offering me this, I jumped at the chance because one, it was different. I love variety. Now you remember I had come out of the theater
Mhm.
where I was running from one play to another, sometimes playing the young leading man, sometimes playing the jerk, sometimes playing the outlaw, sometimes playing the avaricious attorney, the guy with no scruples whatsoever. So I love variety. And so I always told people I'm more at home playing 7 characters in one year than I am playing one character for 7 years. I just loved putting on a different hat, putting on a different costume, putting on a different character. That to me was always the absolute thrill of acting. And so I remember going to the people. I remember there was a man named Joel Thurm, who I believe is still alive and with us, who worked for NBC, and he was in the Department of Talent and making these things happen. And this again is where theater served me so well. You remember that off Broadway show, or the Broadway show I turned down, but eventually did.
Mhm.
In that Broadway show, again, I played a very different character from Steven Keaton. I played a female impersonator. I I was in a red wig, a bustier. What do they call it? Oh my God! I was in like a what do they call it? Oh, because I forget these female clothes I once wore already. Anyway, I was in high heels, the like fisher like hose
Okay.
with a garter belt. That's what I'm
Okay.
trying to think of. Garter belt and hose and all this uh, in a red wig and full female makeup. And he was a vicious son of a bitch who ran a nightclub. And Richard Gere was in this piece on Broadway, uh, and it was about homosexuality in Nazi Germany and the persecution of homosexuals in Nazi Germany. And I played this son of a bitch Nazi informer who turned in several guys. So he was a bastard. So anyway, so I played this drag queen on Broadway, right? Got some wonderful reviews because again, it was an outrageous role. I had a song. I came in on a trapeze. As far as Steven Keaton as you can get, right? And I asked this man at NBC, how the hell did you cast me in the FBI murders? Why? How did I get this role? I'm the squeaky clean guy in Family Ties. And he looked me straight in the eye and said, Michael, some of us still remember you when you were just a bitchy drag queen on Broadway. And I went, wow. He remembered those, he had seen that play and remembered it from all those years ago and said to himself, oh, this nice father on Family Ties, he can play this son of a bitch. I know he can. I've seen him do it on the stage. So all those years back, that Broadway show uh, came gave me a leg up, gave me a leg up in playing that other character.
Yeah. The versatility is there when you look throughout your career. You're not afraid to play anyone, and that's what you've done throughout your career. You take those risks.
Well, I just want to do something different. I
Yeah.
want to do something interesting, as far afield as I can. I don't, you know, I just want to do something interesting. Let me just say this to you. One of the things that's most interesting to me, and why I don't always like playing wonderful characters, sweet, wonderful characters, is they don't often have. One of the most interesting things to me in any story is somebody who has conflict is wonderful. The most interesting sort of conflict is inner conflict. A man who's not sure about, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I, what if I do this? I'll get it. What if I don't do this? Self doubt, conflict is a fascinating thing. And a lot of sweet people don't have that inner conflict. They're just nice. That to me isn't interesting. People who are just nice, who do the right thing all the time. I think doing the right thing is a challenge sometimes, because it's again, sometimes doing the right thing is against our inner nature. A lot of us are son of a bitches. A lot of us just want to protect ourselves. I always say to people, Christianity is one of the toughest things in the world. Nobody wants to turn the other cheek. We want to slap the other one back. Here's
It's
this,
true.
here's this guy named Christ who came along and said, no, turn the other cheek. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy. Who the hell wants to do that? So I think, I always think, to me, the most interesting conflict is inner conflict. A man for whom doing the right thing does not come easily. And so I'm always looking for that in a character. Good man, bad man, whatever that there's inner conflict. That's what makes makes Hamlet a story that goes on forever, so popular. Here's a man who doubts himself at every moment, to be or not to be. I'm not even sure whether I should take my own life. Should I be? Should I not be? It's a man contemplating suicide who can't make a decision. Can't make decisions here, there. Should I kill the guy who killed my actual father or not? If I kill him while he's at prayer, well, he'll go to heaven. Maybe he'll go to heaven. I don't want him to go to heaven, so I can't kill him now. What'll I do? Shall I kill him or not kill him? He's always doubting himself, always having this inner conflict. To this day, Hamlet is so fascinating because he has all this inner conflict. What should I do? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I do, oh, whoa. That was one of the beautiful things about, I'm going to mention this again, one of the things that made Alex P. Keaton such a wonderful character, his inner conflict. Here was a guy who wanted to go for the jugular in terms of money and success and power, and yet he was his parents' son. He had a heart. And every time, watch Family Ties carefully, you'll see Alex P. Keaton struggle with his head and his heart. And that inner conflict made him a fascinating character. And you know something? His heart always won.
Yeah.
Watch Family Ties from that aspect. You'll see Alex P. Keaton in the struggle. What should I do? I want to make the big time, but on the other hand, I got to do it in the right way. His heart keeps speaking to his head and is in conflict with his head and his sense of avarice. That's what makes him a fascinating character, and one of the reasons, and a thing Michael Fox could get his teeth into and played so wonderfully well, but the writers really gave him an edge because he had that inner conflict.
He did. He definitely did. And your work, I mean, you've auditioned for a bunch of people, of course, but I heard John Carpenter, you auditioned for him. What was this for that you auditioned for John Carpenter?
Well, I actually auditioned for The Thing,
Wow.
that wonderful, wonderful, and I knew a couple people, Richard Masser, David Clennon, uh, 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 Joel Polis and another people who wound up being in that. We were all young actors in New York, and uh, yeah, I auditioned for John Carpenter's The Thing and didn't get the call for whatever reason. I just, wasn't right for the ensemble. But but I know some of these other actors. We were all, trying to work our way up as young actors in 20s and 30s in New York. And so I meet some of these guys in horror conventions, when they're there for The Thing, and I'm there for Burt Gummer. And we talk old times, ourself in the theater world, try to break into film back in those days.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's those are fun looking back as a bunch of old guys saying, "Ah, I remember this, remember that."
How is it working with Betty Davis? That's a treasure right there. Whatever happened to old baby Jane there?
Well, that it was just a privilege. I've worked with some really wonderful people. Had the opportunity uh, to be on camera and on the set with some extraordinary people who back to the 30s, people like Sylvia Sidney, who went back in the 30s and the 40s, Eileen Heckert, Jason Robards, uh, um, uh, as you Angela Lansbury, um, uh, guys who Martin Balsam, who a lot of people remember if they love their horror, played Arbogast, the detective in
And
Psycho,
Psycho.
and get that famous fall down the stairs. Martin Balsam. Just I've been fortunate to work with a lot of those wonderful old timers before they passed away in my 30s.
Mhm.
I was a young actor and got to work with some super people, and recently, and even now, a couple of years ago, I did something for Disney, and uh, oh, oh God, names, and got to work with another giant whose name has escaped me. Oh, my God, the apartment with the apartment with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine.
Oh,
Shirley
okay.
MacLaine. I worked with Shirley MacLaine, and I spent most of my time on that set when I wasn't working and Shirley MacLaine wasn't working, sitting in her trailer, begging her to tell me stories about her work with Hitchcock and her association with the Rat Pack and stuff like this. I just, you know, uh, lucky me again.
Yeah. And you mentioned Santa Fe before because you have a house out there, but I learned that your great grandfather was into the railroads and you do stuff with railroads. I heard with Baltimore and stuff like that, into the
Well,
railroad part.
yes, my grandfather and great grandfather were both railroaders, and I was very close, particularly to my paternal grandfather, and loved him. It's that simple. I was almost worshipful, and so I came because he was such a good man, and so I came to associate what he did for a living with the man himself, and so railroads and uh, became an abiding love for me. Model railroading, the real things, and that sort of thing. And I actually became a part owner in a tourist railroad in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which I then sold with the other stockholders to, believe it or not, George R. Martin. And so I finally came to meet George R. through railroading. He lives part time in Santa Fe, and that's how I got to meet him in Santa Fe. And we talked trains, and the next thing you know, we were talking Tremors, and that's how the Tremors Film Festival came about because George just loved the franchise.
Yeah.
So it's weird, one crazy thing like trains leads me to meet George, who also was a bit of a train lover as well as a science fiction crazy man.
Yeah. I think it was something that you've said in the past. It really rings true for just anything because you believe in not only just luck, but more fate. That was a big thing that I learned. One of your quotes was fate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, Uh, I've had good fortune.
Mhm.
I've had good fortune to meet. When I think about it right now, I've been blessed with people who mentors. I say I'm not a big praying man.
Mhm.
Well, I guess I am because I pray every day. Uh, and I always give thanks for my teachers, guides, and mentors. That's on my thank you list every day, my gratitude list. Uh, Teachers, guides, and mentors, because I've had some wonderful people who have taken an interest in me in the past and said, here's some guidance. Here's an idea. Why don't you try this? Gave me a leg up. And I simply had the good sense to listen to them. Say, no, no, no. Instead, no, I'll do this on my own. No, thanks anyway. I listened to them. That was my good sense, to listen to people who had my best interests at heart, and also just to have sometimes things fall my way. I know how unfair life is. I know how absolutely sometimes somebody touches you and with a bit of magic, and for some people that's never going to happen.
Mhm.
They're just not going to catch the breaks. It's like
Right.
it's like being de- dealt a hand of cards. You may have a shit hand, or you may say, "Oh man, this is gold. Whoa, look at this hand." Uh, and the secret is simply doing the best you can with the hand you're dealt, or as Burt Gummer famously said in I think Tremors 2, doing what I can with what I got. And so I consider myself quite blessed because I know a lot of people who are as, if not more, talented than myself, uh, and have not been touched by that little bit of blessing and grace that has touched me sometime. Just that opportunity.
Yeah.
Somebody saying, "We'll give you something different to do." Yeah, yeah, do this because we saw you on Broadway playing a bitchy drag queen, as opposed to we're going to keep you in um, uh, this narrow frame, this little compartment we're making for you. Uh, I've been fortunate. I've been fortunate. So
What are
I don't believe in self-made people. Oh, maybe there are a few. Maybe there are precious few, but I've always had the help of others.
yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
And what are some of the differences now? Because when I was learning about your childhood, you went to I was a Catholic school kid my whole life pretty much because I went to St. John's University. But I went to my mother made me go to a Catholic school my whole life. You went to Catholic school up until high school. Your father wanted you to get more real life experience and have a different story. So how did your views change when we look at Catholicism? Because you mentioned the praying thing, and it's interesting how your relationship, even just with God and Christianity, changes when you're not in that environment anymore. So how did you change just when being out of the Catholicism environment?
Well, I'll tell you what. As you said, my father. I came from a wonderful Irish Catholic mother, who was just a dear human being, heart as big as gold. And here's the most important thing: although she was firmly religious, loved Jesus, and loved her religion with all her heart, she was never so dogmatic that she would judge other people, that she said, that person's a sinner, that person's going to hell. She just always had hope and embraced every heart she met, every person. I'll tell you this. Oh, I had this most unusual childhood in working class Chicago. We had we had Muslims at our table. Why? Because my mother worked in a large she worked in a large city hospital where they were, in Chicago, was an international hospital. If there was somebody from Tehran, a Muslim who didn't have any place to go for Christmas, she was like, "Come on over to our place. Come on over to our place. We're all sitting together in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost." And we had Muslims at the table, people from other countries. So I got to know these people and know all the graciousness and my got that from my father as well, because At the end of grammar school, hell, I wanted to be a priest. I couldn't decide, should I be a Dominican? Should I be a Benedictine? Should I be a Carmelite? I don't know what, you know, I sent away to all these seminaries for their information and stuff like this. My father said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I want to get you a little bit out of your Catholic bubble. I'm sending you to a public high school. I said, why? He said, well, and I was 14. I was really pissed off. I said, you know, Dad, come on. My friends are going to St. Patrick's and St. Ignatius and St. this and St. that. He said, there are a lot of people in this world who don't believe the things you do. And I think it's time, even at age 14, you get to know a few of them. So he basically said, I want you to go to school with Jews. I want you to go to school with Protestants. I want you to go to school with non-believers, because you're going to be in a world of people who aren't like you. So I had this very advanced for the day, you know, and to this day, one of my greatest regrets, the liberalism of my father, the non-judgmentalism of my mother, who's strict. You know, we said the family rosary together, but she never judged other people. She never said that person's going to hell. That person, you know, she was like, no, God's a forgiving God. God's a welcoming God. God's a warm God. And I had a father, to this day, one of my great regrets is I never asked my father, who came from a small town, Iowa, Dad, how did you get so liberal? How did you become that man who said, the world is full of very different people and you need to embrace and understand all of them instead of judging all of them? So I had two parents who were open-hearted. And to this day, my biggest problem with politics, with religion, with philosophy is anybody who lets their belief harden into dogma. There's one way to do this. It's this way. It's the far right way, or it's the far left way, or it's the Christian way, or it's the Messianic Jewish way, or it's the Hindu way, and there's no other way to do it. I have the toughest part when belief, God bless it, hardens into dogma, and you shut yourself off from other people and other ways of looking at the world. That's what I have a problem with to this day. And to that, I owe to my parents.
Yeah, no, and they definitely raised someone who is inspiring and has had some of the most talented roles on screen that we've seen in TV and film. And just when we look at it, because I always like to ask actors when I have them on my show, just the ripple effects and the aftershocks. I'll even allude to Tremors there of the strike. So what are your thoughts on just how the strike has changed the industry now? And I know there's still the concerns with AI, and actors still have concerns. There's still worries there.
Right. Things are being done very differently now. I lived in a golden age.
Yeah.
I lived in an age for writers and actors where we had 24, 26 episodes, not 8 episodes, not 6-episode series. You know, a writer could say, okay, I'm going to do 6 episodes, limited series. It'll never happen again. These are people who stayed in the writer's room for years at a time and cranked out many different series. Things have changed. It's not, as I told you before, there's it's a big old pie, but it's in smaller slices right now. A lot of streaming services did not work for people. They all jumped into it. Some of them made mistakes. There was almost too much content and too much rotten content. You couldn't keep. People asked me the other day, "What are your favorite shows?" I said, I can't decide.
Can't
There's
keep
so
up.
much
There's
out
too
there.
many.
I can't. I don't have regular appointment TV with almost anything anymore. I'll watch a little bit, but there's so much. Occasionally, I'll binge watch something if I think it's particularly interesting, and I'll follow through on it. And I know there's good stuff being out there, but I think it's difficult because I think the industry is still trying to decide what it wants to be post-strike. In streaming services, I don't think they've settled on what they want yet. And so it puts everybody, writers and actors, in a very tough situation. I am fortunate to have lived in again, fate, a golden age. When I come, when I think of the golden age of sitcom, when I entered Family Ties in 1982, I stepped onto the Paramount lot, and there was Cheers beginning. There was Happy Days. Joni Loves Chachi. What was the other thing? Um, oh, Taxi. Taxi was on the next soundstage. These were solid shows. And they were churning out 24, 26 episodes a year. And the writers had a home. The actors had a home. We're far more gypsies now than we ever were in terms of going from one short job to another and moving on. So I feel particularly difficult for the writers who need to be. Actors are used to going, for writers getting to know characters and getting to know a cast and sticking with them and developing them. I think it's a much tougher job for the writers
Yeah.
right now than it is even for the actors. But
Wow.
I don't think things have sorted themselves out. And this is post strike, post COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, I did
Um,
allude to that COVID added to because we look at all the strikes that were happening with UPS, everything was going on strike, and then COVID just really was almost the start of it.
right, right. Things weren't being done because nobody could be close together. How do you have an intimate scene? How do you stay in the same room together? We didn't know what the hell was happening. It was a big guessing game.
Yeah,
And once we did know what happening, we knew it was spread by, you know, through the air and through speaking and singing and things like that, air droplets, atomization of breath and things like that. So that even made us more, shut down on sets when the intimacy is all about it. I don't, that last minutes before you are being shot, there's a hell of a lot of people in your face. The makeup person doing final touches, the hair person saying, "Let me just comb this out." The the cameraman is talking in your face, saying, "Look, I just need you to favor that right eye towards the camera a little more than the left because we got to get that shot." All these people are on top of your ass, right in your face at the last minute before you do something, and there's a real intimacy about it
mhm,
that you know COVID took that into. We all had to be on our guard.
yeah. When you look at your career in entirety, and when you do some reflection and look back on everything you've accomplished, what's something that you do want to achieve? Because you got the music background with doing folk music, being in choirs, and then you're so heavily into the theater. That's where you got your start. Then you get into the TV space and then film. So now, when you look back on everything, what is something that you want to accomplish? Even getting a documentary or a book made about your life story. What's something that you do want to
Well, I
accomplish?
just I just want to have access to the good material that is different from me as possible. I've always thought of myself as a character actor. I I I uh, I want a character with that, as I spoke of you before, with internal conflict. Um, I was talking to I have a good friend, David McFadden, with whom I have uh, coffee every once a week. And David was the showrunner and creator of Home Improvement with Tim Allen, which was on for like 10 years and a tremendous success at Disney, ABC. And and we would just talk about things we'd like to do and things we don't want to do and things that still ring our bells and things like that. And I said to him today, I don't understand people like who are in procedural dramas. One single camera procedural. They're like the medical examiner, and every week they have to come in and talk about brain slices, and somebody took a hit to the head, and roll back the sheet and talk a little bit, and roll the back sheet and say, and do the same thing the week after week. I said, I want to do somebody with some conflict and some where the stakes are high, as opposed to just explaining how somebody died. I said those are the roles that interest me the least. Or um, I want to do something where the stakes are high. Where something's fighting for something, and it means something, and that uh, and that if it doesn't get done, bad things are going to happen. That's still one of the things I love about Tremors. There's something really at stake there. Bad things taking over the world,
Yeah.
and I'm standing in the way of that happening.
Yeah.
So
And helping to save it. Yeah.
so I just hope there are a few more good scripts out there.
Yeah.
You know, that's what every actor wishes for, is good writing.
Yeah.
And so, Lord, may that be.
Yeah. Michael, I want to thank you for coming on the show here tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else you would love to let your fans know? Anything else that we didn't cover? And I know you got the new film with Heather Graham out, and you also got the
Well, as I
Christmas
say,
film,
Heather Graham, Chosen Family,
Chosen
that's out
Family.
the 11th of this month, the 11th of October, and streaming on demand, and also in limited release in theaters. And of course, this Tremors Film Festival coming up at the end of October in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and with George R. Martin and I hosting this thing, and then the Netflix, something called The Merry Gentleman, as in God rest ye, Merry Gentleman, on Netflix, premiering, I think, on Netflix November 20th. So it'll be around for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So fortunate to have a few things to talk about, and grateful for those as well.
Yes. Michael, love to have you back on the show anytime. It was an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure going over your life
Thank you.
story.
Thanks for doing your homework. You know all about me, man. You got a dossier there. Wow.
Oh,
I'm
it was my
impressed with
pleasure.
anybody. I'm impressed with anybody who comes prepared. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, it means a lot. Thank you to Richard for getting this set up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Pleasure to do
Michael.
that drop. All my best to you, and stay safe, my friend. Where are you from, by the way? Where are you
I'm in
staying? Where are you calling from?
Connecticut, and I cover the whole
Oh, okay.
tri-state. Yeah, tri-state
Oh,
area.
okay.
I cover the
Okay.
whole world, but mainly my fan base is in the tri-state area
Great.
in Connecticut. And I know you got the Connecticut connection with
I
Yale. So.
spent 5 wonderful years in New Haven, and I miss that part of the world. I still love New England.
Wow. Well, at least you appreciate it, because I know a lot of people here. It's tough to make it out. I think it's more of when you're an outsider, you have a great appreciation for it because you found success here. When you're usually here, you grow up with everything that's around you, so you have to move out to maybe reflect and appreciate it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And those are my school years. Those are
Yeah.
great. Those are great years when I was coming up and learning a lot of things and just filling my head with ideas. And I love New Haven. It was so close to New York, so close to Boston, and I don't know. I love both those. I love those cities, and I can still see myself living somewhere on that eastern seaboard someday. But I can't do it with the wife to whom I'm married, because she has a huge problem with mosquitoes. She won't live anywhere with their mosquitoes. They
Oh.
are attracted to her like a moth to a flame. So
It,
anyway,
you
so I
can't like
won't
the
be
cold
living out
weather
there
either.
anytime soon.
Yeah.
Say that again. Sorry.
Can't you don't miss the cold weather either.
Well, I grew up
In
in Chicago,
Chicago.
and look, and I lived in Minneapolis, St. Paul for a couple of years, so cold doesn't bother me.
Wow.
I I just, you get the right clothing, I can deal with that. Yeah, that doesn't bother me.
No,
All
no,
right, you
no.
take care. Nice
Take care,
talking to you. An
Michael.
absolute
Anytime
pleasure.
you're back, welcome back on when you got new material. I look forward to everything you got in the future, and thank you for everything that you've done this far.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yes. Bye
Take
bye,
care.
Michael. Take care.